Yes.
Good idea.
You got.
Okay. Hello and welcome to our monthly book club. Today, we're going to be discussing the book Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents: How to Heal from Distant, Rejecting, or Self-Involved Parents by Lindsay Gibson. And with me today, I have Agatha and James.
Hello.
So welcome, you guys.
Hold on, because my thing is on. Hi, guys. Sorry.
Hi. We're live.
Yes, we are. And before we get going here, just real quick, this book club is sponsored by Audible. Audible is, the biggest online retailer currently for audiobooks. I believe they have over 100,000 audiobooks to choose from. And if you use the code Thrive After Abuse, you can get one free audiobook. So you can go to audibletrial.com/Thrive After Abuse to get that free audiobook if you're interested in signing up. And next month, we're going to be reading the book, The Anger Trap by Dr. Les Carter. It's how to free yourself from the frustrations that sabotage your life. And this is an old copy of it, but this is the book. So book clubs always last Thursday of every month at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, okay, I guess let's hop into it. What did you guys think about this book?
Me first.
Sure.
Okay, so I read it many times because each time I find something that was really either helpful or really interesting to me. I think my main takeaway would be that when we are in the process of healing from, especially as survivors, because I always try to read the book and try to see what helped me as a survivor of toxic relationship, right? Not just with my parents, but relate to what our community, what we are dealing with.
Right.
So one of the things that was very clear to me, and I'm really happy she pointed it out, is that therapy will not replace maturity. And just to, we probably will talk a little bit more about it later, but oh God, this is the most important thing, I think, for me, because when we heal in the therapy, we deal with what happened in that toxic relationship, the hurt, the pain, expressing emotions, anger, all of that. But there is this other factor, which is maturing and learning how to act like an adult that we never received from our parents. And I think that book just shows how much work there is for us to do if we can identify. And I'm gonna bet, I can probably bet $1,000 and I wouldn't lose, that probably 99.9% of people who are in a toxic relationship had immature parents. So I win.
Yeah, that'd be a good bet to make.
And in all fairness, I think there's this evolution of awakening and awareness for parents too. And, she'd mentioned that in the book that, back really up until the late 1940s, parenting was seen as discipline. So it was all about, you're just literally raising your children. Yeah. And that's it. There was no real emotional connection. There was no guidance. The children didn't have really any input, and it was the whole kind of be seen and not heard.
Yep.
And it's amazing how far we've come since then.
Or like the other parent that said, my only job is to keep a roof over your head.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not true.
Yeah, I don't see how a parent could ever say that to a child and think it's all okay.
Yeah.
So.
Well, they could. So when I read this book, I was actually really interested in how deeply in our culture that lack of maturity is, and that bad parenting in the past. So I read Alice Miller a couple books, and one of them was For Your Own Good, and she actually described that scientists were teaching parents how to just model the right and perfect behavior of their child and obedience. So talk about emotional immaturity.
Yeah.
it was just like everywhere. So
Right. And let's see if you guys are just joining us and people are, oh my gosh, my laptop battery is running low. That's delightful.
I'm gonna put a name of the book in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I'll just say it out loud for those listening on the podcast. We're discussing the book, The Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson. And then the book next month is called The Anger Trap by Dr. Les Carter.
Yep.
So I guess let me just hop into my notes here.
Hey, real quick, Agatha had mentioned therapy, and my
Yes.
therapist, I don't know if it's normal or not, but kind of once we got past the relationship toxic and all that, we kind of went into like home life and childhood. So I guess it just depends on the therapist, but it was, like you said, it was a whole nother layer of understanding the reason why we, typically end up with a toxic person.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I like what Agatha was saying about, if a person, therapy can only help a person to the level of maturity and self-awareness that they have. Right. So if a person's not aware that they have a problem, then no change at that stage is going to be possible because they don't have that ability to self-reflect.
Much less to try to even put in the work to do it, because it's hard to change anything.
It is. And this was something Agatha and I were talking about earlier. If you think about how difficult it can be to change one thing about ourselves, it's like pushing a boulder up a hill. Yeah. It's any little thing. I mean, right now, one of the things I'm working on is trying to time chunk my day. So just following a schedule has been this whole trial and error process. And that's a pretty basic
thing to do.
It's a basic thing. And you can tell, I mean, it's very black or white. Like you can tell either I did this or I didn't do it.
Yeah.
And behavior, especially for any of us, because we are so close to it, it's difficult for us to see the own issues that we have. And so even if a person really wants to change a certain behavior, the odds of them actually seeing it as a problem as they're doing it is they might only catch 10% of the times that they're, so it's a challenge. And so for emotionally immature people, you have people that might have, 20 different behaviors that are all very immature. And then of course, there's got to be some crossover, which is going to add to that challenge of them changing. So let me hop into this about, doing some definitions here. So what is emotional maturity? And she describes it as an emotionally mature person is able to do at a minimum 6 different things. They're able to express and control their emotions in an appropriate way. They're fully accountable for their behavior. They're self-reflective. They're able to handle situations without unnecessarily needing to escalate or intimidate others to get their way. They're able to identify, empathize, and respond to the needs of others in an appropriate way. And they also treat children in an age-appropriate way. And emotionally mature adults are ones that can function independently while also having deep emotional attachments to others. They pursue their wants and needs, but don't exploit others in the process. They've differentiated from their original family relationships sufficiently to build a life of their own. That's a big one. So like breaking away. So for example, somebody that hasn't differentiated would be their parents still have a very large say in their life. Like, oh, well, I've been married for 5 years. My mom really wants me to get pregnant. Yeah. Sort of like, wait, how is your mom? You know what I mean?
Or trying to fit into the mold of what your parents think that you're supposed to fit into.
Right. What you're supposed to do.
Whether it be married by a certain age or so many kids or a certain job or because it's what they did or it's what they think is best for you.
Right. Emotionally mature people have a well-developed sense of self and they treasure their closest relationships.
Mm-hmm.
They're comfortable and honest about their own feelings and they get along well with others. We're not talking about abusive people here, just other people in general. This is due to their well-developed empathy, impulse control, and emotional intelligence. When there is a problem, they deal with it directly. They're interested in sharing their lives and hearing about the inner lives of others. And they're able to open up and share with people in an emotionally appropriate and then also intimate way for those in their inner circle. Yeah.
That was for me like almost like groundbreaking, because I've, like sometimes like we talk intimacy, boundaries, like all of those, like it's kind of like disconnected, but maturity, emotional maturity connects it all for me. Like it was just like click in my head. I'm like, you cannot have intimacy without empathy. You cannot have empathy without emotional maturity.
Yeah.
Like all of it is like together.
Yes.
And it's like you can't be safe in a relationship without someone who is emotionally mature. Like all of the guys we dated or like married to or whatever, they were, that were abusive, they were also emotionally mature. So we're not saying, oh, they were immature, like to feel sorry for them. Not that. They still abusive. They still have all the crazy things, whatever they deal with, they have to deal with that. But like that just shows you that, this is why they were acting like a little children in so many different ways. And for me, that lack of emotional maturity basically means lack of developed empathy.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was like, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Well, it just never developed for them. They got stuck at a certain stage of emotionally maturity, and it's they never emerged into adulthood emotionally at all. So
it doesn't really matter what happened over there. Like, I mean, that's one way to look at it, like what happened there and try to understand them. But like, it's really, that's why they don't have, like, that's why we don't experience any real intimacy with them. It's all fake.
Yes.
Yeah. It's all fake charm. It's all fake connection. It's all fake mirroring. It's all fake. And that's how in our gut feeling we sense it, because there's no real empathy.
Yeah.
Right.
Like for me, it validated the whole word of like why I could never feel like true. Like I bet most people had this feeling like when you are talking with someone that you kind of feel like they don't really see you. Because they lack that empathy. And like the I'm not sure what I'm exactly trying to say, but I was just so excited how it's all connected together.
Yeah.
Maturity, intimacy, empathy, healthy boundaries, like it's all makes sense for an emotionally mature person. So
yes, I like
it is pretty cool.
I like how you sum that up. So there's the three things there. There's emotional maturity, emotional intimacy, and empathy.
Yes.
And they all go hand in hand. And so they're the foundations of a healthy relationship. If those things are not present, then a healthy sense of mutuality in a healthy relationship is just not going to be present.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of on that note, let me hop into the chat here real quick. Lighthouse asks, so when you read a story about repentance of a bad guy, was he not a narcissist before? I mean, is not narcissism not absolutely curable? And I just wanted to say, just because somebody says that they're sorry or that they've changed doesn't mean that they've changed. Either, and here's the thing too, with problematic people, well, they're manipulative by and large. Yeah. And they also they tend to just say things.
It's not true remorse.
Yeah. I've seen, there's been domestic abusers who have marched in domestic violence parades. Yeah. Chris Watts has cried, and said that he's sorry about his children. So just because they say these things, I wouldn't believe it.
And there's no apology that can even begin to make up for that at all.
Yeah. And the chance, you run the risk of, if you let a person that's really dangerous back into your life, like the risk versus reward is just not there.
Mm-hmm.
If they haven't changed, there's going to be profound damage to you. So Agatha, what were you going to say?
Well, so here's the really cool thing, and that was one of my takeaways. Let me just, so I'm not gonna mess it up. Here it is. I realized why emotionally mature people have this really weird idea of forgiveness and apology. Like, oh, let's leave it in the past, just forgive me and forget. And it's because they lack that deepness of emotion of what's happening. They don't get the emotional impact because they lack that empathy and that maturity. They don't understand like that, we can hold, like, emotionally mature people can hold three different emotions at the same time. We can be angry, but also have a sympathy and, and be sad at the same time. And we can still interact with another person in the midst of those three different emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't get that. So
they don't feel it at all.
No. So for them, it's either or. And then like, oh, but so let's say they feel it could be like a narcissist, an abuser doesn't mean they don't feel anything. They can feel rage. They can feel pity for themselves. They can. The person that abused me in my life calls me every now and then saying, I'm so sorry, I did never meant to do it to you. And I feel so bad about myself. But, he doesn't call me because he wants me to feel better about what happened or fix anything that happened or make up for anything that happened. What he wants is experience that I forgive you. Oh, let's leave it in the past. I'm free from it. Now I can go and be happy and be me now because I'm free from it. That's not forgiveness. They don't. Forgiveness is such a complicated process and it's so emotionally complex process.
Mm-hmm.
They're not capable of experiencing it in any way except forgive and forget. They don't get it.
Not a true form of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And actions, it's always actions over words, because they oftentimes love to put on a grand display of, I'm so sorry. And, these grand displays, and it means nothing. That's not a sign that a person's changed. The only sign that a person's changed is that they've actually changed. But this is what I was saying. Like, if they've already shown you that they're so profoundly emotionally immature, their behavior is so outrageous and not anywhere on the spectrum of not the basics of adult behavior, then them just apologizing isn't going to fix that. Like, there's profound work that they need to do in order to fix that. So 3 therapy sessions isn't going to do it. 30 therapy sessions isn't going to do it. They've got to be able to really self-reflect and do the work necessary in order to work on these different personality traits.
Or it's just an empty apology.
Yeah. So, okay, let me move on to what is an emotionally mature parent? And then we'll kind of compare and contrast here. So emotionally mature parents engage with their child in a sincere, age-appropriate, and emotionally intimate level almost all of the time. They are attuned to their child's moods and welcome their feelings with interest. They see their child as an individual. A child feels safe connecting with such a parent versus a person who's emotionally immature. And so I have quite a few bullet points here, but an emotionally immature person is unable to express or control their emotions in an appropriate way. They frequently overreact. They lack accountability, blame others, and minimize their mistakes. They're self-involved to the expense of others, and rarely, if able, are able to be sincerely self-reflective. They are defensive, and it's these defense mechanisms that keeps their awareness of their behavior from them being actually aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't think that they are defensive, immature, or insecure. Only other people can see this. They escalate, intimidate, or manipulate others to get their way. They're not able to comfortably identify, empathize, or respond to the needs of others in an appropriate way. They have rigid expectations. Their self-esteem rises and falls based on how others react to them. And let me actually just stop here for a moment. All of these behavior traits that I'm talking about, they don't have to all be in the same person. And it's not that the sum of all of them somehow means that you're a narcissist or a sociopath. So I think all three of us that read this book, you see certain traits within yourself and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that's me. Like I've done that before. The self-esteem rising and falling based on how others react to us. That for sure was something I did frequently in the past before I realized that's what was going on.
Or like being triggered and acting impulsively on our emotions. We all done it. So like, I think so this is another, I'm going to put my takeaway here because it fits in. So I guess it's important to know that if you are raised by emotionally mature parents, which we established we probably were all raised by emotionally mature parents, we will have some emotionally maturity ourselves. And, in our healing process, and, I don't know if you all have kids now or not. I do have a 16, almost 17-year-old. There were moments when I could see myself acting like my mother, which, like for me was like a wake up thing, right?
Yeah.
So then I had to deal with my maturity, emotional, my maturity, like in life, regardless in every area, not just like a parent, to be honest with you. But here is the important thing to remember. We survive so much, and no, that's not excuses from like being immature with our children, but there'll be moments of high stress when our reaction will be emotionally mature. And, so this is what I will say here, because this is how I made peace with that. When I catch myself acting emotionally mature about something, I see it. And once I see it, I can deal with it. And I think the whole key here is, you cannot be blaming yourself for doing something you don't see. But if there is something you see and you can change it, you can grow in it, that's the thing you're gonna deal with in the moment. So don't beat up on yourself. Don't think you are a narcissist. Don't think you're gonna screw up your kids or you already screwed them up. Don't put, we are so, it's like an automatic thing for us to put that shame and guilt on us. Please don't use this book for, to do it to yourself. Just learn from it how to be different.
Healthy people have the ability to self-reflect. And that's one of the biggest challenges when we do self-reflect, is sometimes we see things that need work. But this is also where having, I think, healthy self-esteem comes into play, and realizing, well, we're human and we're always going to be in this stage of growth. So, you see something that needs work, you work on it, you drive on. So, and then what you were saying too about empathy, there was a part in here that the author put that I absolutely loved. She said, a trait of an emotionally immature person is that they have low to no empathy and they are emotionally insensitive. And she defines it. She says, true empathy isn't just identifying with how another person might feel. It's actually resonating with those feelings. So I've heard a lot online where people talk about, manipulators or narcissists or sociopaths are also very empathetic. And because they're able to identify, they're really tuned in to the emotions. They can be very tuned into the emotions of others, but it's with the intent to exploit them. And I never was comfortable using the word empathy in the same sentence as manipulation, because they don't go together. It's like peanut butter and mayonnaise. Like they just don't go together, Yeah. So I really liked how she described it as empathy. It's not only identifying with somebody, how they might feel, it's also resonating with it. Big thing there.
Because they can sometimes copy empathy, but it's not an actual, it has no backing behind it at all.
Yeah. If they truly had empathy, then there wouldn't be that level of exploitation or emotional insensitivity.
Yeah.
And And that's the other thing, how she had said, they are oftentimes insensitive because they just lack the ability to put themselves in other people's shoes. And so James, you and I were talking about this earlier about how, sometimes people might joke in a way that's incredibly insensitive. And we might even say something to them like, hey, dude, come on, like, that's not funny to me.
Yeah.
And they don't get it. And they'll sit there and they'll defend their position as to why they just meant it as a joke, why it was funny, and then why you're the one with the problem. You're just too sensitive.
Yeah.
Whereas an emotionally mature person would be like, wow, man, I am sorry. I did not mean to offend you. I thought I was being funny. There was no bad intent there. But since it hurt your feelings, I won't joke with you like that anymore.
Right. And they stop.
Right. They don't do it.
Well, because emotionally mature person can, first of all, they respect the emotional boundaries. They get that, how they feel doesn't mean the other person will feel the same way. They can in tune with the other person feeling without being overly like there was this respect, and
they're able to change.
Mm-hmm.
But they can be in reality, and what it does is emotionally mature person can actually validate the other person's experience. Mm-hmm. There's the validation of it. So you can are we gonna go there soon? Like the empty still face kind of study, how they did for children. Do you remember?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh my gosh. So for me, that was emotionally healthy parent and I've seen it recently because I've seen a woman with a kid, and the child, that was a little baby, was like, oh, like whining, and the mom like, oh, what's wrong? And she mirrors the whole emotion of the child, and then the child learns, oh, I'm sad, and there's no language for it, but there is this emotional
like a connection.
Yes, and like a knowledge almost, like, so the child is slowly emotionally maturing. Okay, this is how sadness feels, and this is the kind of reaction it provides for me from my empathetic mother. This is how joy feels, like I'm happy, my mom is happy with me, right? And that's the healthy thing. Now, unfortunately, so I've seen, and you've probably seen in your life, emotionally mature people when the child goes, oh, don't cry. So there's lack of validation, lack of mirroring. Let me fix that for you because you do not fit my fantasy of my life, basically. Like, you're not supposed to cry here, right? Mm-hmm. So there's lack of mirroring, lack of validation. We don't get mature. I realized why I was so afraid of crying. I've never, ever really, really cried when I was a kid because I've never went through that crying cycle with my mother when I just cried and naturally stopped. I was never allowed to cry. I was always yelled at for crying, right? Mm-hmm. And I know there's many kids, like, there's nothing special about my case here. Like, there's so many kids that went through that. Like, don't cry. Don't let people see you cry. Don't cry, especially if you're a guy. Oh God, don't ever cry. Because you're a guy, right? So I remember I used to hide in the closet and but I would not cry. I would just do everything to not to cry. A few years ago, I had this first crying session when I actually cried, and I was afraid I will never ever stop. It stopped by itself because the regular crying cycle, I think you kind of put it in your notes, Dana, that we as human, we can just trust ourselves that we have emotional capacity to go through every single emotion in a healthy way if we are allowed to.
Yep.
Because crying starts and it naturally ends. You're not going to cry for weeks. You're not going to even cry for hours. Most likely you're going to cry maybe 20, maybe half an hour, maybe 40 minutes. Maybe you'll be louder or quiet.
For me, it's 30 seconds. So.
It could be 30 seconds. I've cried for 30 minutes. I'm not joking.
Oh.
Right.
Well, and I think at the end of the day, it's everybody's entitled to feel how they feel, even if it doesn't make sense to us. So if they're angry, if they're sad, and I can see how parents, especially, that can be challenging when you've got a child who's having this emotion that, you might not agree with. So that can be a challenge to be well, but they're their own person. They're going to feel how they're going to feel about it. And it's not up to us to try to push them into feeling a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean,
Or they don't know what to do because they're like, I can't really feel that, so I don't know what to do when you're crying in front of me.
yes, and so
yeah,
you bring up a great point. So the how she defines emotionally immature parents is she says that at the core, they fear genuine emotion and they pull back from emotional closeness.
Hmm.
They use coping mechanisms that resist reality rather than dealing with it. And so it's interesting because if you were to, I think, tell an emotionally immature person this, they would be like, what are you talking about? You're nuts. This is just psychobabble. You're the one with the issue. Get out of here, because they lack that ability to self-reflect. And in all fairness, this stuff is kind of deep. And I think you have to be around personal growth stuff for a little while for this to actually sink in.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yes,
and to be fair too, it's probably for a different reason, but after the divorce and everything, if I was, going on dates, I would sometimes shy away from, um, intimacy. Just, I think out of fear of somebody getting too close and then hitting me where it hurts or making some comment or, whatever else toxic people do to,
yeah.
to kind of gain your trust and then take advantage of it. So,
Well, and that goes back to what Agatha was saying earlier about, the emotional intimacy and the emotional maturity. And emotional intimacy, that's something that's built over time and appropriate behavior. And so it's in large part, it's built over how a person handles, information that you're telling them, and how how you're able to work through issues that come up. So if you set a boundary, if you disagree with them, or vice versa, and how you're able to talk about that tactfully and appropriately. And so then that takes time to kind of figure out, hey, is this other person emotionally safe?
yep.
And um,
yeah.
then the relationship can really start. But until that emotional safety isn't there, and then, like I was saying, that takes trust. It requires appropriate trust that's built over time in order for us to feel comfortable being vulnerable.
Hmm.
Or I should say, the healthy way to do this is when trust is built over an appropriate period of time, then we're able to become emotionally vulnerable to a person that we believe, based on their behavior, is emotionally safe enough for us to do so. And then
Yeah.
at that point, then emotional intimacy can start. But where I think so many of us have gone wrong is we just got that order all tangled up. We didn't know how to trust people. We took other people at face value. We gave them the benefit of the doubt when we shouldn't have. We were very quick to be an open book and be very emotionally vulnerable to a
And
person
open.
that we hardly knew and
Yeah.
that wasn't emotionally safe. So,
Well, we believe the fantasy that they're projecting out to us,
I
yeah.
think it's more than just believing the fantasy. I think it's hard to expect of ourselves to act as a mature, emotionally mature person after being abused. That's why we always, here everyone always recommends to be not in a relationship for like 2 years or something
Yeah.
like that after, toxic relationship, because it's not that you just need to heal, but you need to heal and learn from it and mature, and like there's just
You
so
be
much
okay
that
with
needs to
being alone.
happen. That's another
Yeah.
sign of being mature person, right? You are okay being alone because you are comfortable with yourself.
Well, and it's hard to hear that until you almost have to almost go through it yourself to say, oh crap, they were right. I'm definitely not ready to date yet.
Yeah, it's nothing based on
Oh,
fear and rush will ever work out. That's what I will say here. So,
Yep.
like
yeah.
trying
What
to
were you saying, Dana?
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate, like you were saying, James, when we have these realizations of, oh, maybe I shouldn't be dating right now. It tends to be something really painful happens. And we have that realization of, you know what, I think I just need to bench myself for a little bit because this person not calling me back, or this date not going as planned, or this just not feeling chemistry with another person can just feel so devastating. And dating shouldn't feel devastating like that. Like, we need to have our self-esteem at a level where dating doesn't influence it.
Right.
So, okay, so let me get back to describing emotionally immature parents. So they use coping mechanisms that resist reality rather than dealing with it. They don't welcome self-reflection, so they rarely accept blame or apologize. Their immaturity makes them inconsistent and emotionally unreliable, and they're blind to their children's needs once their own agenda comes into play. They discount their children's feelings and don't notice their child's moods or inner experience, and they don't know how to give support. If their child gets upset, they may get angry or seek to punish the child. They don't know how to validate their children's feelings and instincts, and without this validation, children learn to give in to what others seem sure about.
Mm-hmm.
So because they're continually invalidated, that's when we lose our internal compass. If, like what Agatha was saying earlier, or I think James too, with babies, when you're upset early on, we need that mirroring, that validation of, oh, you're upset, it's okay, or oh, you're happy, it's okay. We start getting all tangled up when, if you're upset and you've got maybe even a well-intended parent who said, oh, you've got nothing to cry about, you're fine. Oh, I had it worse when I was a child. Oh, you don't know. Oh, it's not that bad.
Or keep it up and I'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of these messages that oftentimes the unintended consequences, by that time that child reaches adulthood or even dating age, that they're not grounded enough in their emotions to be confident in them. So whatever they're experiencing, they default to giving other people the benefit of the doubt. They're like, well, I think I'm uncomfortable, or I'm angry, or this doesn't feel right. But if somebody disagrees with me, boom, I'm going to go with what they think.
You're very passive and go with the flow.
And that's a huge problem. That's one of the biggest turning points in healing, is when people can start to really get grounded in how they feel and then start to take action from that place instead of seeking validation from others.
Yeah. Well, it's hard not to seek that validation from others, because we don't really have, like, it's almost like we like in that reference point for how it feels to be safe, how it feels to be loved. We don't have that. Yeah. So when then you have someone coming at you strong with the love bombing, you're like, kaboom.
Well, I think that's why it's so important to be single for a while, so you can kind of level yourself out and you're like, all right, so here's my reference point. And then you can kind of gradually go from there.
Yeah. And one of the things for me, I just thought of this just now. When I first began making videos and we started talking about love bombing, and I was describing it in terms of, manipulative people oftentimes do this. They move very quick. They tell you everything that you want to hear, and then they do a 180 on you. And I had a lot of people asking me, like, well, how can you tell the difference between somebody who's just really interested in you and somebody who's trying to manipulate you? And I struggled with how to answer this question for the longest time. But it really boils down to that rushing of intimacy and that love bombing and those professions. It's too much, too fast. Yeah. It's 100% all of the time emotional immaturity.
Yep.
And so if you can see it for what it is, and it can feel real. I mean, I think we've all had those moments where, like, man, this person seems so amazing. They seem so perfect. But the reality is, that's the fantasy that we've built about them. And it's going to take time to see the reality. Just like when you start a new job and you're like, man, this place is amazing. I love it here. And then about 30 days in, you really start seeing the reality of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, even like I lived in Italy briefly. And at first I was like, this place is amazing. It's so enchanting. And it's just like a postcard. And then, you get settled in and you're like, oh my gosh, all of these great stone buildings, that I was so enchanted with, they echo. and you can hear everything all of the time. And all of the laundry hanging on strings through the buildings was so romantic, but then you live in it and you're like, I don't have a freaking dryer.
Yes.
So, like, you know what I mean? Or
First world problem.
And the
yeah,
humanity.
well, but it's the reality of it. So the point I'm trying to make is that we all create fantasies in a wide variety of ways. It's how we think things are going to be. And then the reality, more often than not, doesn't line up to that 100%.
Yeah.
Wow. No,
So-
and so here's what really got me in this book, this whole idea of the healing fantasy and the authentic self and the raw self that we play in that healing fantasy. And I look at it this way. So like I'm gonna use my mom, but I'm not gonna give any details, but like, let's say my mother, she's emotionally immature, and so basically I had to play a specific role to fit in a relationship with my mother, to fit her healing fantasy. My mother had a healing fantasy in which she can be this best mother she can be, and I could be this kid. So she wanted me to be typical way. So basically I was paying for the love of my mother with my whole self. That was the price for the love, right?
Wow.
And then I couldn't be me. I had to be that, play that role. And I did play this role for so many freaking years until like a couple weeks ago, basically, when I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do it anymore, right? Like it just, and here's what really, I think that really provided for me a lot. Every time, because I've had so many different conflicts with my mother, and every time there was a conflict, something from that fantasy just chipped away. Every single time. And I could see like in the past how I stopped doing this here, I stopped doing this here, I stopped doing this. And I'm not trying to do it really, really personal. I'm just, kind of trying to explain it a little bit. But this is how it happens for everyone. If you have a conflict with someone, it could be like if you feel emotionally like, bad, like there is some anger or something, it could be because you are not being you.
You're not being true to yourself.
Yeah. You have to play a role and you are sick and tired of it because it takes way more energy than just be you. It costs you everything you are basically to play a role. And Dana, do you have at hand, or James, do you have at hand the definition of the hatred she provided in the book, how it's a natural thing? Because I think that was so freaking brilliant for me.
Yeah.
It was something like
Yes, I have it.
Okay, so when I was a teenager, and probably many of us teenagers, we said, I hate you to your mother or your father. Like how many of us did that? And then I give the definition now because I think it's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
You got it?
Yeah.
Awesome, go.
Okay. So she makes the comment that feeling hatred towards a person is a normal and involuntary reaction when someone tries to control you for no good reason. However, I slightly disagree with that. So my take on that is I think that feeling resentful is a normal reaction when somebody tries to control you for no reason. Feeling hatred is when they've been able to successfully control you over a period of time.
Yeah.
So I think that feeling grows. It starts off as resentment, then it turns into anger, then it grows into hatred.
It probably starts as confusion.
It always does.
It starts as confusion, then it becomes resentment, and then it's a hate. And by the time we are teenagers, we hate our parents.
Yeah. Or just people. I mean, I look back at my life and, the different people that have been incredibly toxic, it's gotten to the point of I had to get to the point of I actually hated them in order to leave. I either hated them or I feared them, and I couldn't hang on anymore. And that was when I had to leave. And so there's been so many different turning points in my own healing. And, I think one of the biggest ones has been realizing that to get it in tune with these more mild emotions and see them as the warning signs that there's some sort of imbalance at play and something needs to happen now. So we don't need to wait for that. We don't need to wait until we can't hang on anymore. We don't need to wait until things for concrete proof that they are in fact
Yeah.
dangerous. You know, that if you're feeling frustration, resentment, anger, there's a reason for it.
It's a warning sign too.
And it's generally a sign of a boundary violation.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So let me see, another comment, another aha moment I had was she had mentioned about children with emotionally immature parents. She said, you know, you might not have realized that you had parents that were emotionally immature. Like there might have just been this feeling that there's something off with your life that you couldn't pinpoint, and that you'd been walking around feeling kind of lonely. How did she put it? Lonely and empty. And that something was wrong or different about you. And we might have just assumed that we were introverts.
Yeah.
Because we might also be introverts, but that's not where those feelings of loneliness and emptiness are coming from. And so she says, you know, these feelings are a normal response to lacking human companionship or connection. And that I about wanted to cry when I read that, because it just made so many things make sense. Yeah. Oh.
Same.
Same here. Same here. I have it in my notes still. It was.
Well, I would wonder, like, why do I feel lonely and alone in the world? Like, I have friends, I have coworkers I talk to. I mean, I have relationships, but sometimes I just feel lonely, and it's because of that I'm probably going to say the name wrong. Existential loneliness.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Because of your parents being distant, or what was the other one? Being distant mostly. So.
Oh.
Yeah, because when there's not that connection there, we're not being seen for who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Like it requires that connection. When somebody acknowledges you as a human being, right? And it's like, okay, this is James. These are your wants and your needs and your thoughts and your opinions. I may or may not disagree. I'll probably disagree with a few of them, right? Because we're individuals, and you're not going to find somebody that's 100% all the time with you. But seeing this other person as an individual, Brene Brown had said in one of her books, which I actually disagreed with the way that she said it, but I liked the metaphor she used. And it was from the Velveteen Rabbit. And it was basically, how do we become real? And it's by being validated and seen. And that love, with a little stuffed animal, it wears your fur thin and your button eye falls off. And that love makes you become real. And in many ways, that's what it is with a child. And if you're in a home where everything about you is being invalidated, it's difficult to have self-love. It's difficult to even have a self.
Yes, we losing that self. We losing that self in that lack of empathetic, emotionally, mature parent. It's goodness. It's like, so the moment they don't validate us, we do not learn how to validate ourselves. So our whole experience of ourself and life and everything is basically
or when they validate you only when you fit into the mold of what they expect you to be as their kid, and whatever. So
the result of that, I think, this is what's very very, very sad to me, is that as a result of that, that's why we fall in those toxic relationships. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, okay, so here's the thing, like I'm gonna compare it to the diet. It's like our emotional diet, we starved. We are literally freaking starved. And when you are starved, you don't care what you're gonna eat. You're gonna eat donut, sugar. You don't care what it is. Anything that fills you up. So, and on top of it, we are okay being starved. Like we are conditioned to be basically okay with it. Like we can tolerate. We have such a high tolerance for being starved at this point. So that's when we end up in those toxic relationships, because they're gonna sell us that donut for of love
or crumbs.
the cramps, exactly. And then we will be okay during the times when they don't give us that affection. We'll be okay with that intermittent gratification because we are okay with it
We're
for our
used to
whole
it.
life, until, you know, that's how we get stuck for so long, like for so long in those relationships, because we are so okay with it, because
Yeah.
that's all we know. And that's why people don't understand how hard it is to leave an abusive and toxic relationship, because
It's
we
all
are
you
okay
know.
with it. Yes.
Well, it's all you know, and crumbs is better than nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for a person who's already starving, they don't have that reassurance of, well, there's more out there.
Yeah.
To a person who's starving, and it goes back to kind of the attachment stuff that we were talking about in the last book. If there is that level of, if there's not that secure attachment there, then there's that level of insecurity of, well, you keep telling me that there's something else out there, or that I can find it within, but I don't know if you're right. So I think I just need, it's not that bad. I'm just not going to let go, because this is what I have right now in the moment. And that comes from
It's a lot scarier than what you know, even if it's horrible.
She had some really great things to say about kind of what causes emotional immaturity too, that I wanted to touch on. She says, so emotional immaturity stems from loss, abandonment, and pain. It could be the result of substance abuse, mental illness, personality disorders, or society at the time. And I think that's significant. So the common ground between all of that, the substance abuse, I would say untreated mental illness, personality disorders, or the society at the time, is the inability to be fully present and emotionally available. So, you know, when a person's caught up in substance abuse, or really, I would say any form of addiction, not just substance, if they're hoarding, if they've got a gambling addiction, if they've got an eating disorder, anything that's causing them to be so incredibly focused, just kind of depression, even just lost in themselves for whatever reason, they're not going to be able to effectively be there for somebody else. And also with society at the time, that's what we were just talking about, that this understanding of the importance of establishing that connection with the child, seeing them as an individual, validating them, allowing them to make decisions. This is a relatively new thing. I can remember being a child, and it was very much where, let's say, I remember my next door neighbor, actually, it's probably a better example. She was an alcoholic, and she had a little girl who at the time was 4 or 5 years old. And my neighbor she was a partier, and there were always people over there. And anytime her little girl wasn't comfortable around somebody, she would totally invalidate that. Oh, no, go over there. That's Uncle Tom, or that's Uncle, I don't know, John or whoever, or that's Aunt Jane. Go over to them, give them a hug, sit on their lap. And she'd push her onto these people. And at the time, this was 20 years ago, at the time, I remember thinking like, yikes, that really concerns me, because some of these people were super sketchy. But now I can see why that's a problem, because that little girl, I can only imagine what her compass must be for keeping herself safe, because she was never allowed to as a child. Okay. So here, this is another quote she made that I loved. That many emotionally immature people, this would come from a very controlling, domineering parent. Many emotionally immature people were over pruned as children. The result is that they are like a bonsai tree that has been trained to grow into an unnatural shape, unable to develop into the person they might have been. These people develop strong defenses that take the place of their self. They learned at a young age that certain feelings were bad or forbidden or would cause them pain, and so they learned to shut them out. And there was a video, I'll have to see if I can find it. I had mentioned this before. It's a little boy, and I don't remember where in the world he is. He has an accent, so it might have been like Haiti or Jamaica or someplace like that. Little boy, and was being filmed, and he was probably 6 or 7 years old, and he's saying, there is no weakness. There is no weakness here. I am strong. I am not weak. And you could tell, like, this kid was really, he meant it. Like, he wasn't joking around. And I remember watching that video thinking, this little boy has been abused, because this is not normal behavior. And for somebody to have told him time and time and time again that, don't cry, don't be weak, you don't need anything, you are strong, this is it. It was terrifying, because you could see if there wasn't an intervention, and there probably wasn't for this little boy, he's going to grow up with all kinds of problems, and he's probably going to become abusive.
Well, what's really sad is that we're dealing with generation of very emotionally mature people, emotionally intelligent people, and each of them try to. So when you were a child and you have that emotionally mature person, you try to, taking care for you, you still deeply believe that there is that real parent inside of them, and somehow you will connect to them, right? And that's how you try to be the way they want you to be, because then you think they're gonna love you, so that you try to fit this fantasy. So I was looking at it from that perspective, but then I was like, oh my God, so like my mother was forced to live in a fantasy of her mother, right?
Yeah.
And then I was forced to live in my mother's fantasy. And God, you know what, for a moment my daughter had to live in my healing fantasy, because I didn't know any better. And I just say how it is. So here's what I see about it. Like, of course, some of them were like, some of the emotionally immature people are like very, very much not just neglectful or verbally abusive, but they're physically abusive. They have other issues like narcissism or borderline, or like all the different mental psychiatric conditions, like all the other stuff. But like some of them were just, they lost that self trying to heal, their parent basally.
Yeah.
And that just like because there was this need to heal for that connection, and they just never been able to get it. So it just makes me so freaking sad that we have all this generation. But here is why this book is so great. So here's a little mistake I made, and I wasn't intentional. Actually, I was having conflicts with my mother, so I kind of said to her a couple of things I shouldn't have. This book is great because it encourages you to deal with the emotional immaturity of your parent in your head, in your thinking.
Well, and within ourselves.
Yes.
I think the bigger issue is where we are today and what's going on with us now. Yeah.
Yes, but it also, like, it's good for you to validate, like, oh, I'm not, like, it's valid point to have that my mother is emotionally mature, and she was probably raised by an emotionally mature person. It's not that great to go and have a conversation with them about it, because let's say your mother is like 65 and she has been immature emotionally for 65 years of her life, and she's not going to be able to handle the information you have for her. You think like, oh my gosh, this is going to be awesome. We're going to be all mature in the family. No, not going to happen. So I'm just saying that. And, your thinking is private. Your thinking is there for you. There's no better good thinking. Your thinking is for you. And, you can have all the valid points in your head. And this book has a bunch of exercises that will actually get you to a pretty good place about different things,
Yes. Let me cover real quick the results of being emotionally immature, and then the children of immature parents. And then let's go into what you're talking about. So the results of being emotionally immature are that we don't have a sense of who we are and how we feel. We can't learn to empathize or engage with others at a deep level because we don't have a solid grounding in who we are or how we feel. So a lot of when people talk about being empaths and, that they're so in tune with other people's emotions, the reality is more times than not, they're completely out of tune with their own. And this is why. So they don't have a solid sense of self or a solid sense of how they feel. They're taking in all of this stuff from other people. this isn't a strength. This is a sign of non-existent boundaries.
Yeah.
So when we have those boundaries in place and we're able, because when we're taking in what we think are other people's emotions, we're assuming. And so true empathy, it's resonating with those emotions, but it's also being present with that person. It's not trying to fix them. It's not making it all about us. Where let's say if they just found out that they have cancer, we're sobbing, we're crying, we're, being completely emotional about it. Like, real empathy is being there for them. It's not taking it on to the point of it's now all about us and it's debilitating us.
Right.
I love that because, James, sorry, do you want to go?
I was just thinking while you were speaking, as a child with one of my parents, I kind of had to learn when they would come home, what kind of gauge what kind of mood they were in to if I could talk to them or just kind of leave them be.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to, because that's the only way to get any of your needs met. So it's, and it's hard to transition from that into adulthood and because like you said, it's definitely assuming. And up until a few months ago, I didn't even realize I was assuming a lot of other people's intent and how people were thinking and what they were feeling. And that's not fair to anybody.
And odds are we're probably going to be wrong.
Right. And it
we're not them.
Causes headaches and you overanalyze and you overthink. And it's altogether just bad to do.
Yes. And so when we have that healthy boundary in place, we were talking about this last night in the live stream. When we have that healthy boundary in place, it doesn't matter what their intentions are. It doesn't matter. Just like somebody joking around, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter if they have a brain injury, if they're mentally ill, if they're personality disordered, if they're just a jerk, if they truly are hilarious and we have no sense of humor. None of that matters. What matters is if it's somebody is treating you in a way that you're not comfortable with, and we assert ourselves, like, the line for how we handle things is where our boundaries are. But in order to have that boundary, we have to be in tune enough to know when it's being crossed.
Yep.
And
our feelings, if you don't validate yourself and your feelings, you cannot put boundaries up. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
And then, also you become, I think she called it over empathetic.
Yeah. Something like that.
Overly
empathic or something similar to that.
I love that. And I think that's what you were saying before, Dana, when, you can feel what's happening for the other person and you are okay still as, an independent or, human being over here. And I think that's a great example. Like, so let's say you had a bad day at work, you come home to your children, right? It doesn't matter your children have to have a bad day at home, right? You can still be happy because they have an A on a chemistry test. So you can be upset because something happened at work, but we're happy for your child because you have empathy for your child.
Right.
And you don't have to be like that. Kill joy.
Mm-hmm.
That thing, yes.
Yeah. And Sam asks here, he talks about with his ex-girlfriend, he said she always fought hard to forge this toxic attachment, especially when he was moving on and in a better state in his life. And a lot of this stuff does come from if a person doesn't have that secure attachment, if it's insecure or, I'm drawing a blank on the other one, kind of anxious or avoidant attachment styles, that if you're talking about a person who's incredibly emotionally immature like this, they have this very rigid approach of either you love me or you don't.
Yeah,
and
there's no middle ground.
There's no real middle ground. And so they can't hold these multiple viewpoints in their mind. And so they tend to only understand. It's very, very childlike. There's this very extreme of, if you love me, I need you to just pour it on. And especially as adults, it's that need for that constant reassurance. And with narcissism, it's more that constant reassurance is to a level of almost admiration and being put on a pedestal. Yeah. So it's just too much. It's absolutely draining, because then this is why, because you can't, There's no sincere, authentic relationship possible with a person who's that emotionally immature, who you can't ever bring up an issue. You can't have a sincere conversation. You can't ever have any issue with them or their behavior. You're not allowed to disagree. You're not allowed to have your own thoughts or opinions that differ from theirs. They don't know how to communicate effectively. So either they say nothing or they rage. All of this stuff. So if there's not that level of emotional, like Agatha was saying, emotional maturity, emotional empathy, and what was the other one?
Emotional intimacy and empathy.
Thank you. Emotional intimacy. Then it's just not going to ever be a healthy relationship. So there's a stage in our healing where when we start realizing this, of course, we're going to focus on the other person. We're understanding the toxic person. Why were they this way? This is so strange, and they did this and that and the other, and we're putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. But a very important stage in healing is when we start to self-reflect, and we're like, okay, what about this kept me hooked in?
Right.
Why was I dancing this dance with this person? And what was the appeal, and and not coming from a place of judgment, but coming from a place of curiosity, because every single thing that you do that you are a willing participant in is going to give you clues about generally like things that don't work out well. Those give you the biggest clues of stuff that it's the next level of stuff that we need to work on.
Yeah.
And if you read this book, there's the bunch of exercises about discovering your healing fantasy, and some of those things that don't work out, actually all those relationships that did not work out in your life, you were probably trying to act out the healing fantasy you created as a 5-year-old. So just think about it. Your template for romantic relationship is 5. It's at the level of the 5-year-old, right? Pretty much. That's where we were. So that's why it's good to. It was so.
You just repeat it over and over and over and over again until you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe you change it, but it was so cool when I was reading this book, because there was this Polish psychologist mentioned there. They really butcher his last name because his name is Dombrowski, not Dobrowski. That's really cute. But I forgot exactly the term he used, but he literally shows that and James, that's the thing you wanted to share, so you're gonna probably go there, that the internalizers, because we are internalizer externalizers. So internalizer are people who like to use whatever's happening for their own growth and to better themselves, and the externalizers always to kind of look for something out there.
Right.
But the coolest thing here was that and I think that's what would answer Sam too. Whatever you're trying now to understand, like, so focus on the feelings you have and use those feelings to propel your growth, because you can do it. Like every feelings we have, it's usually like really showing that either like any kind of discomfort we're having, it's probably because we are not in reality about something, and we can use it to strip away something that does not really belong to your life into your life, and it's not good for you. And that I was like, whoa, this is the whole point of our healing basically journey. Like we're stripping away what was never ours.
I love that.
I had no idea how many layers there were to this
No
healing.
joke, right? Oh my gosh.
I should be skinny.
Every book is like 20 more layers.
I know, and I don't know why I'm putting on weight lately. I should be skinny. I should be size 2 right now because I stripped so many layers this year, and I'm like, what?
That's funny.
What's wrong?
Yeah, I think she said in the book too that most likely, if you're reading this book, you're an internalizer.
Yeah, I would imagine.
So.
Yeah, because you're not allowed to be an externalizer. So, okay, let's see here. So children of emotionally immature parents, So like I mentioned before, she had said, if your parents weren't emotionally mature, you may have felt the effects, but you might not have realized what was wrong. You might have felt that feeling empty and alone was just how you were, something wrong or different about you. However, this is a normal response to lacking human companionship or connection. It's what happens when we don't get empathy from others. A child with an emotionally immature parent feels all alone. Oh, God. And that it's up to them to meet their wants and needs and can't ask for help. There is no comfort and no protection. The parent waits for you to fix everything while they just watch. While the emotionally immature parent may be present, they offer little help, comfort, or protection. Children tend to cope with being emotionally starved out, that they will do whatever is necessary to make some kind of connection with the parent. This is kind of the Stockholm syndrome kind of thing. So they start justifying any crumbs of kindness, no matter how abusive the parent is, that these crumbs of kindness mean that the parent loves them.
Yep.
They may put the parent's needs first, and then down the road as adults do this with others. And they might think that this is the price of a relationship.
Yeah.
Yikes, right? How many can relate to that? I've got to put you first because that's the price of a relationship.
I mean, that example in the book when she says about all the different kinds of immature parents, how the mother was abusing the child, and that girl, she heard her father, doing dishes in the kitchen, and she was like, oh, that was a sign of my father's support for me.
Yeah.
He wanted to let me know he's there. I mean, like, we really twist ourselves in pretzels.
Mm-hmm.
It's so sad. And she says that children of emotionally immature parents, they continually deny their own needs because they fear rejection or punishment. These children want to grow up quickly and jump into adulthood prematurely. I have seen this where really by the age of 18, immediately they go into the military or they get married.
I did it.
To get away.
I left my home. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they move out immediately. I moved out at 17.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I can relate. Let's see. So they may be quick to get a job, marry the wrong person, have children. They may marry the wrong, or stay in a job that's toxic. They settle for this mistreatment because it's all they've known, and they've been convinced they need to settle for crumbs because crumbs are better than nothing. As children, we don't recognize our parents' limitations because to do so is scary, and we have no other baseline for normal. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, until we gain this awareness of the different problematic ways our upbringing shaped us, then we won't be able to recognize similarly hurtful people. That's a big one. Because
it's your template for your entire life until you figure it out.
It really truly is. And if we, in general, like if we're in that pattern of we're just glossing over anything that's a problem, we're assuming that we must be misinterpreting it. We don't feel valid in having the feelings that we have. And I think many of us are at this place now when those rose-colored glasses come off, which unfortunately, it generally takes a profoundly painful experience for that to happen. You start seeing the world a lot more clearly, and it can be very overwhelming. And so then that's when people start coming into the live stream and they're like, help, I see narcissists everywhere. Yeah. And we were talking last night, it's not that they're seeing narcissists everywhere, it's that they're seeing problematic behavior everywhere.
You're seeing it for what it really is.
Seeing it for what it really is. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's just shocking. It feels like you're in the Matrix, and you woke up and you're like, wow, what?
Yeah. Exactly.
So I want to just run home, close the door, and say like, no immature people inside, no problematic people inside.
Yeah, and so I think
take the red pill.
Yeah, well, I think
the blue pill.
That's a stage in all of this, right? So then we're aware of what is going on out there, and then the next stage is being aware of what's going on inside of us, and then the next stage, I would say, is learning to navigate the two.
Yes, because I like how I think she said it somewhere. Hold on, but healing. I think this is like a really cool definition of healing. Healing is creating for us. So in healing, we're creating for ourselves a way of peaceful life in the face of reality of our past and the reality of our present. So whatever is happening right now, we can be at peace with it. And we don't pay for that peace with ourselves anymore. We are authentically alive in it. So
yeah, you're accepting of where you're at.
yeah, and I think are we going there yet or not yet? About that there are different ways to deal with emotionally mature people without, you know, breaking our own boundaries or like exploiting our own resources.
Let me cover some more of the children part, and then we'll hop to that. Okay, so let's see. What did we say? That children of such parents tend to stay in toxic relationships, jobs that don't work for them, unfulfilling careers.
Check.
We all got that, guys.
Yeah, they struggle with kind of knowing what they want and what's for them and what's not for them. We may think that it's up to us to meet our emotional needs 100% of the time. So the truth is that we need others for comfort and closeness. It's what relationships are all about. Mm-hmm. And if our lives are going to start working, we have to realize that we know what we need, not anyone else. And so to seek that validation from within, realizing that she describes it, she mentioned something like, you are not a bottomless pit of wants and needs.
Nope.
And so you might have been around a bunch of other people that made you feel that way whenever you stated a preference or anything, but you're not. And you do know when things feel good and comfortable and safe and secure for you. You do know it's, you know, when what needs to be, what you need more of and what you're full on, sort of like the different gauges on your car, because they're always going to be in flux, like your oil, your water, your gas, your all of these different things. And so you do know, and the way that we know, we don't have engine lights, but we do have emotions. And so your emotions kind of let you know what you need and what you don't need.
Now, you do not know when you are in the midst of dealing with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Let's just make it clear.
Yes.
But you have to heal a bit. And I think like we mentioned that before, because we lack that point of reference, how it feels to be safe, how it feels to be nourished, how it feels to be intimate with someone. Because we lack those points of reference, I think that the best thing you can give yourself when you are healing, build a network, like support network of healthy, mature, emotionally mature people around yourself. You don't have to have them in your life like that. They don't need to be that tight with you, that close. They can be like just on the edge of your life, but you want to learn from them. Like that's one of the things I've done for myself. Like I literally learned kind of like picking up from people and like feeling around them, because you will start recognizing it. So you do know all the time. You have this capacity inside of you, just because you're a human being, you're born as a human being. You have a capacity to recognize how love feels, how intimacy feels. You have the capacity.
If somebody's Team James or not Team James, pretty much. It's your constants.
Yes, you do. But
Very important.
When you are out of the toxic relationship, everything is dysregulated. So give yourself space and time to kind of tune in again.
Yep.
That's all I'm just trying to say here.
Yes.
You know, but there are circumstances when you will be very, very confused about it.
Yes, I agree. And I think that one of the first steps, if your person's feeling emotionally dysregulated, is to try to become as regulated as possible.
Yeah.
So if you're at a place where you are fresh, especially if you are fresh out, you just don't trust anyone, that's okay. And that a big part of the solution to that is just going slow. Because I've seen so many people, myself included, I really struggled with this, where I felt so profoundly broken because I wasn't the same way I was before. I couldn't immediately open up to other people 100% like I was doing before. It took me seriously like 7 years to realize that that was never healthy to begin with. So,
and you can't go back.
And you can't ever go back. And going back would have caused me to speed and crash right into another toxic person, because it was like my foot was stuck on the gas pedal in some ways. So there were things that I had to really slow down and learn to do different. And the way that I was interacting with other people was one of them. And just realizing, just going slow, that it's an honor and a privilege to get to know other people and for them to get to know me. And so there was no rush that if somebody is going to open up or if you're going to share deep personal things about yourself, that's stuff that's earned. That's not just stuff to just, we don't want to throw our pearls to swine, basically. So really slowing that down. And then once you're able to have a better understanding of how to keep yourself safe and you realize that you control the pace, that really helps tremendously with that emotional dysregulation, because we tend to live in that state of fear because we don't know. We're like, who else could be abusive? Who else could be out there? And then we start making all of the wrong connections of, oh, well, you know what? My abuser had red hair, so I'm going to avoid redheads. Oh, my abuser was German. I'm going to avoid Germans. Oh, my abuser was 10 years older than me. I'm no more older men. We start swearing off all of these traits thinking it'll help keep us safe. Oh, I'm not going to do online dating anymore. I'm not going to, we start trying to pick out specifics, and it's not that, because every single abusive person is going to be different. But if you realize that you set the pace, that you don't need to wait until things are so bad to walk away. Nope. If something's uncomfortable, that you're learning the skills to be able to address it, it can help. To feel more settled.
And gaining that power is very profound, and it feels really, really good.
Yeah.
To be able to just be like, nope, I'm done. You're out.
But it's also there's a positive twist to it, because then if you're in a relationship with a healthy person, when you start feeling like, you can still feel lonely, but it will be just a healthy sign of, you're like, wow, I just really want to connect with you.
Right. And you feel safe to speak with them about it and figure out some kind of resolution to the issue.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, realizing that we're not going to get all of our needs met from one person. I think that's another big aha moment for a lot of people, is there's this unrealistic expectation right out of the gate, kind of like what Sam was saying with his ex, where it was like she really needed him to be her everything. Like, I need you to hold me in constant positive regard. I need you to continue to tell me how wonderful I am. And that's like pouring water into a bucket full of holes, and it's just never enough. I dated a guy like this before, and I remember thinking at that time that was exactly what it is. It was almost like, when you have a dog and you leave, and then you come back and your dog acts like it hasn't seen you and all day or all week.
Yes.
That was how this guy was. If I even left for for a day and then come back, it was just, well, where were, I missed you and this, that, and the other. And it was just so suffocating, because he had made me his whole world, but it was never enough. He never got to that place where he felt comfortable. It was just nobody can be a person's 100%. So,
well, emotionally mature people welcome boundaries. So that's a sign.
That's a really valid point. That's huge.
Yes.
Huge. I feel like we need to make that into an image.
We do. Yeah.
Because
that was
be a painting.
Yeah, it could be a painting.
But that's so great, because they don't only welcome boundaries, we celebrate them. Like, because emotionally mature people, when you meet this another emotionally mature people, and you will know that, because they will have standards, they will have boundaries, they will be emotionally, like all those different things we talked about, you'll be like, oh my God. So you will really celebrate them, and they will celebrate you with your boundaries and standards and everything, because
it creates emotional safety, because you know where the limits are. And I'm at this place in my life now where for a long time, I, not intentionally, but and not even, I wasn't even aware of it. I really avoided conflict of any kind. And I really thought that a healthy relationship was a conflict-free relationship.
Yeah.
And so now I'm at the place of, it's when we have differences, for the person to be able to bring them up, and so we can discuss it and then move towards some sort of resolution with it. But it's scary when a person never has an issue with you, because
Yeah.
you know that they're not being authentic for whatever reason. But then you also don't know where those lines are and when they're going to snap and freak out and just be like, I'm done, I can't handle this. And you had no idea that you were doing anything, or
Yeah.
and then there's also no growth that's possible when people are going to inevitably step over your boundaries. When there's not that addressed, there's no growth possible in the relationship.
Yeah. And you're not learning on a deep level how to kind of relate to your romantic partner or whatever. You're
Right.
I mean, you can relate without boundaries. You can have
Right.
intimacy
Yeah.
without respecting each other's boundaries. It just doesn't happen, because then the person is not invited, and they not come by invitation, they come by intrusion. They they're like breaking into your life, like into your heart or whatever, like into your space. It's like the thief or the robber. It's not a guest. Emotionally mature people, they welcome each other, and they are able, be each other guests. You're a guest in my space, I am guest in your space. We share, we care for each other, we share our experiences, we validate each other's experiences. I don't have to feel like you feel, you don't have to feel like I feel, but we understand each other's feelings, and we can talk about it and share.
We're not going to just say, oh, I'm fine, fine, everything that you're doing is fine, I have no issues whatsoever. Because then you start getting to this place where you just feel like you're walking on eggshells, because you're not really sure if that's true. And it is so much more reassuring when you know that you have somebody in your life that's going to be honest in a tactful way, and who's going to be able to assert their boundaries in a tactful, appropriate, respectful way, so that you can do the same. It's just, and so she says here too, about along the lines of this is, when we are around emotionally immature people, the problem isn't that we don't know how to express ourselves. The problem is that they don't want to hear it. They aren't trying to understand. They're trying to convince you that you're mistaken or wrong. Some people feel guilty because their emotional needs are outweighing their vows or commitments. But relationships don't run on vows and promises. They run on emotional intimacy. Without this, the relationship won't thrive. Mutual emotional responsiveness is an important ingredient in relationships.
Yeah, that explains why each of my former relationships did not work.
Yeah.
Seriously.
It's so obvious. That's one of the things, the further I get down this rabbit hole of, I don't know, just self-awareness and all these different traits, it sounds so basic, right?
It's like, duh, I should know that.
Yes, totally. And, I really, like, in all fairness, I really don't think that most people do, but you think about it and you're like, yeah, you just need to be honest in a tactful way with other people. You need to understand how you feel. You need to understand where your lines are and how to assert yourself, and be honest with yourself about these things, and then be honest in a tactful way. Unless, of course, you're in danger, then you just need to leave. With other people, and then look for people that are able to reciprocate that.
That's another way you can recognize someone who's safe for you and emotionally mature, because it's easy then. It's just easy. It's not hard work with them. You can just,
well, yes and no. It is, but there's actual conversation.
That true, but those conversations aren't like out of fear. I mean, you can be.
Yes.
I'm saying you can still be nervous. Like So let's say I'm seeing someone now, and some of the conversation, because like this is the first time I'm in, let's say this stage relationship that I haven't been in this stage of relationship for quite a while. So some of the conversation I'll be having now, they make me a little bit nervous, but I'm talking with someone who is emotionally mature. And that makes it so much more easier for me to do now. So
Yes.
there will be some kind of ease you will experience because there is that easiness of connection.
Yes, that's a very valid point.
Yes.
It is easy because you know that they do respect your boundaries and that they're able to control their emotions appropriately. So if they don't agree, they're not going to fly into a rage. They're not going to become like attacking. They're not going to start using things that you've told them, against you. There is none of that. There's just that. Yeah, you know where you stand.
When it's not like that, and I'm already like this by default. When somebody's mad at me, it bothers me deeply. Where it's like I want to do almost anything to make them not be upset with me anymore.
Yeah,
and that's with a safe person that's emotionally mature. They're probably not going to have that as bad of an effect on you. But it's tough to get out of that. For sure.
Well, because the anger, they're not using their anger to punish you.
Right.
So if there is an issue and if they're upset, they're able to approach it in a way of like, okay, James, there's something that you said the other day and kind of X, Y, and Z. And I really had my feelings hurt, or I really kind of wanted to talk about this more in depth. And you're not being held emotionally hostage, and there's not this icy presence or this tension that's created because they're able to deal with issues directly. And when you're dealing with two people are being sincere and they're solutions oriented, these issues don't grow into like monstrous proportions. They're able to just say like, hey, this is what's up. And then it's resolved like quickly, because both people are sincere and solutions oriented.
What a concept, huh?
Yeah, right.
Maturity.
Yeah, because I used to be the same. I still struggle with that, with really having a hard time with confrontation. But that's because my old pattern of confrontation has always been profoundly negative, because it was being held emotionally hostage, and it did stem from a lot of abandonment issues of, well, if I have an issue with them, then I'm terrified that they might leave. And once I realized that, it made me a lot more okay, because I realized I was approaching this as like that wounded child, not as the adult I am today. And so, yep, now I'm like, okay, well, you know what? They either stay or they leave, but I need to address this because this isn't working. And same thing if they got angry. Before, I would literally go into freeze mode and just could not function and would do anything to get them to get a sense of calm back.
Well, it's like they shut your oxygen off and you're like,
yes,
oh crap, what do I do?
It's terrible. Anxiety, nightmares, crying, bending over backwards to be nice to them, baking banana bread, like doing whatever I possibly could to smooth things over. And yikes. Yeah, it's a problem.
I think the other side of it is, I think some people, some children of emotionally mature people have problem asking for help. It's a very similar pattern. Like we get paralyzed, we are afraid. And, just the template is not like asking mature person for help, because our emotionally mature people, parents, they were incapable of supporting us.
Yeah, it's a foreign concept to them.
Yeah, well, it's like Pia Melody had said, basically we become wantless and needless.
Yeah.
And I had noticed when she worded it like that, I was like, bingo, that's so spot on, because I had always been fiercely independent, but wasn't a positive thing. I'd always thought it was a positive thing, but that's exactly how I was, where I got to this point in life where I'm like, you know what? I don't want anything. I don't need anything, because if I ever did, I'd be let down. So you know what? I'm cool. Like, I'm just I'll figure it out. I'll handle it. And, having to, at the age of 41, kind of correct that and figure out, allow wants and needs. I had there'd been there's these little moments, you know, you have in healing where these little kind of awareness comes up. And so one of the moments for me with that was the realization of, I had gotten to the place where, like with birthdays and gift giving, if people were going to give me a gift, I literally did not know what I wanted. And people would ask me and I just had no idea. So, and then having to get to the place of, well, Dana, think about something. Like, you really need to think about this and get clearer. And this was like a nothing thing, right? Like, it's a
Say that as soon as you said it, it was like, when people would ask me, I would have to think, okay, not what do I need, but what's in my list of of things that I guess that I want that's not necessary to tell them.
I didn't even have any.
Like, I don't know.
I didn't even have any clue. I was approaching it from the place of, I don't want to be a bother. Mm-hmm. So whatever you want to give me, which is true, it's a gift. Whatever you want to get me is fine. But I just always felt like, well, I just don't want to be a bother. But it had literally gotten to the place where I had no insight into what I actually wanted as a gift. And seriously, I can't even tell you for how many birthdays and Christmases people would just end up giving me a gift card because I didn't know. And then and then for many years I thought, oh, it's because I'm just a minimalist. Like, I just don't want or need stuff. And it's because I had gotten that message that if you ever need anything, you're not going to get it. So don't ask.
And them asking freaks you out because you're like, you actually care about like giving a thoughtful gift that I can actually use and not just a, I don't know, a candle maker or something silly like that.
Yep.
So
were you guys ever in the situation when someone asks you, what do you want? And you're like, oh, I just want for people to be happy. And like, you start thinking about other things. Like, I used to be so codependent. Oh my God.
My mom, this is our ongoing thing with holidays. So, cause she'll say, you know, well, I don't need anything. Just write a check to a charity. And my aunt is the same way. And so, and they are set, they are comfortable, and they can get whatever they want. But I have told her, I said, you know, I will still write a check to a charity. However, let's splurge. And I mean, it doesn't have to be like, I got these fleece lined gloves. They were $12, little things like that. Mm-hmm. That it's okay to want stuff like that. Yes, there are starving children in the world. Yes, there are these things, and yes, I will do something about that, but it's okay. It's okay to have these little luxuries in life.
Well, it's a way that a lot of people show love to another person.
That's a good
something
point, James.
That is thoughtful and a comfort item like a blanket or fleece gloves or whatever.
Yeah.
Or a candle.
It clicked for me, just one thing from, you know, this book with Pia Melody, when she basically, you remember Pia Melody said that anything that is extreme is immature.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the same here. Like, emotionally mature person will be like, it's okay to get a gift and it's okay to give to charity. Like, they will always be able to find a middle way. You know, compromise is not sacrifice. Compromise is something we welcome, and like the middle way, we welcome it because we like when it's a win-win. We like when it's a win-win, right? So there's just, oh my gosh, I think like if you read this book and you're actually like trying to like just put yourself somewhere on that maturity spectrum and try to bring yourself to like way mature, you know, mature way of being, it's all emotionally, and it's gonna show up in your life, by the way, right? Because like the emotional maturity will show up, like you're gonna be behaving in a more mature way. I think it's just really exciting what's gonna happen in your life.
Yeah, and I think you bring a good point about that spectrum, because you know, at first we read books like this and we're so focused on the other person. Oh yes, they are very emotionally immature. Yes, this is everything that was wrong with them. But there's more to be gained if we can reflect and be like, okay, we're all on this continuum. So where am I on this continuum? And what are some of the things that I need to self-reflect on, and what needs work? And so Farah had mentioned, she said, emotional intelligence is allowing others to help you when you need it. And yes. And so as we were all reading this book, I think we all there was, quite a few things that were like, boy, you know what? I do that. And yikes, I do that too. And yikes, because this stuff tends to fly under our conscious awareness. But then when you're aware of it, it's so cool because it just opens up. It's like you just level up, and now you're able to start working on it. And then this book is the kind of book I'd like to read it again in a year from now and kind of see, because there was so much in here. This was just my tabs. If you can see, there's seriously like 50 tabs. From my, you read a book like this and it's like drinking out of a fire hose. Yeah. And so in realizing, wow, okay, I'm only probably absorbing maybe 5 or 10% of this. And I'd really like to reread it in a year from now and kind of see how much more I absorb, because it's going to be different things.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So it's funny, because when I started reading this book, I felt like some books, I call it like a face slapper. I feel like this book slapped me in my face. First it described my mother, then it described me, then it described a bunch of my ex-boyfriends. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. I'm gonna hate this book. But then it's really gets like with all the exercises and like the deeper understanding of it, you actually discover that you're not that emotionally mature. You're not where you were. And then, you kind of see like different areas when you can still do really some serious work. And that's, I think it's a great book. I think the book is a little bit too intellectualizing in some places. I almost feel like, so I don't know if that's the right word, when it describes different techniques of like actually interacting with people who are emotionally mature in our life. Let's say you have parents that you don't want necessarily relationship, or you just want to kind of limit relationship with them, limit contact, but you still want to have some contact. So, there are, because, you have some goals, some kind of family, I don't know, there's some things you have to get, achieve. So like she shows different ways to like talking to your, let's say, mother. And it's goal-oriented, not relationship-oriented. You kind of want to honor, not maybe honor, but like accept that there are limitations there because you talk with the emotionally mature person. I was like, this all look great on the paper. I'm like, this is great on the paper. It's really fantastic. Yeah. I just see it happening that great way. So,
yeah, there's things in there, and it just depends on where we are on the spectrum with our own skill set, because a lot of this stuff, being tactful, knowing where our boundaries are, knowing how to be assertive, this is all skills that take a lot of practice and a lot of refinement and a lot of self-reflection and a lot of trial and error. And so, same thing with kind of seeing where other people are on the spectrum. And
then we survived toxic relationship on top of that. So
yeah.
I was like, yeah, that's not that easy and doable to do.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of challenges. She mentions, speaking of seeing kind of where other people are, and I think this exercise can also help us to kind of see where we are. But again, the challenge with that is we are often not the best judge of things we need to work on because we're so close to it.
Yes.
Like, for example, real quick, I was in this class last night on mandatory reporting, and it was a class of, counselors and therapists and, people like that. And one of the women there had said something about, well, like when families fight and stuff, when there's like screaming and yelling and name calling, like people just sometimes fight. And so where in the line is the line for mandatory reporting? And I remember thinking like, no, your family fights like that. Not everybody is like that. So, but she just obviously well, of course they're all like this, right? This is just how people disagree. And so that was really shocking to hear come out of a therapist's mouth. Okay, so anyways, so assessing the emotional maturity of others. She divides this into 3 categories. So one is realistic and reliable, and under that she has 4 topics. She says they work with reality rather than fighting it.
Yes.
They think they can feel and think at the same time. Their consistency makes them reliable, and they don't take everything personally. So those are all important for a person to be realistic and reliable. And I will say too, when a person, you can tell if a person, or when we especially are working with reality rather than fighting it. If you find yourself continually disappointed by a person who's continually disappointed you, then we're fighting reality. So when a person's behavior no longer surprises us, that's when we realize, okay, this is just how they are, and we've accepted the reality of this is just where this person is, and my expectation of where they want to be is not their reality. So I just thought that was worth noting. Okay, so respectful and reciprocal. They respect your boundaries. They give back to you.
Mm-hmm.
They are flexible and compromise well. They're even-tempered. They're willing to be influenced. They're truthful. They apologize and make amends. Responsive. And let me just back up to the influence thing. The difference between influence and manipulation is the who benefits from it. So manipulation, both approaches are kind of leveraging another person's emotions, but with influence, it's more of a positive thing. And they are the ones that benefit from that. Whereas manipulation, we are the ones that benefit from that. So just let that be said. Okay, and then responsive. So their empathy makes you feel safe. They make you feel seen and understood. They like to comfort and be comforted. They reflect on their actions and try to change. They can laugh and be playful, which I thought was really interesting and something I need to work on. And they're enjoyable to be around. I thought that was a really fantastic checklist.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel that you can't just sit down home by yourself and try to assess yourself that much. Like it's, yeah, like you will don't go crazy over that checklist with yourself. Like I think you will see the reality more when you are actually interacting with other people.
Yeah. And like, and like we were saying, it's always easier to see the stuff in other people. That's just how it works. So, it's just giving yourself, I think, grace and compassion as we move forward in this process. But this book, I would say it is now hands down in my top 5 favorite books. I just really, really liked it. There is so much information, and I've had this book club for, I don't even know, at least 3 years now. So we've read and discussed a book. So 12 books a year. So at least 46 books. And that's not including all of the other books I've read before, which is probably a solid 50 to 100.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's saying a lot when I say that this is in my top 5. I just can't speak highly enough. I think Lindsay Gibson, good job. This is just a really great book.
I absolutely love the book too. I think it's just written with so much ease.
Yes.
I am so grateful that she didn't put it on any other spectrum than just maturity, because that took out the whole wrong and right out of it, and it just simply shows, and it's emotional maturity, so it's already about emotion. It's, I don't know, I'm just loving it. And once again, I always love everything that has to do with like a breaking out of the fantasy of something, really being in a reality, because it's like, that's what life is about, right? It's just being here and now, and be okay with here and now, and don't try to make it be into something else that it is, and don't try to make yourself be someone else than you are, and let other people be who they are. And every book that addresses that always just makes me really happy, because I want those kind of information to be like really spread out there. One of the things I talk with my therapist quite often is that, like, it's not what's happening in your life, like you can get hurt, or something good or something bad can always happen in life, but it's not what's happening in your life, but like how you handle the reality of it. And I always love it because we are like you can survive toxic relationship, but then you can have a bankruptcy, or there's so many other things that can happen in your life every single day. And if you can grow and heal and become this mature human being, humans being have such a great capacity of dealing with so much in such a powerful and positive way. And like I just really wish for each of us to experience that fullness of handling our reality, because I think life is pretty damn amazing when that happens.
Yeah. Well, and real quick, you bring up a really valid point that I think is I think one of the top takeaways for people tonight, I would hope, is that there is this spectrum of emotional maturity. We are all on it. And if you can take away the pressure of trying to figure out, does this person have a personality disorder? Are they a narcissist? Are they a sociopath? Putting all of that aside, because that'll just spin you in circles trying to get clarity, but focus on where is their behavior on this spectrum. And also, and of course it helps to figure out kind of where your own is as well. But if they're a deeply emotionally immature person, that's profoundly problematic. Yeah. And trying to have an adult mature relationship, a mature, emotionally mature relationship with an emotionally immature person, it's not going to work. So I think that's the big takeaway. It's not about personality disorders. It's about behavior, and it's about where everybody is on the spectrum. So is there any last words, parting words?
Yes, just one more thing, because I just remember I wanted to say it before and I forgot. So as an emotionally person, as an emotionally mature human being, you will know when to do your best and when to not to do your best. And I loved it because I felt like it gives me so much freedom to decide when the situation actually requires me to, because there's this obligation, right? This like, do your best, do your best, do your best. No, as an emotionally mature person, when you absolutely don't need to do your best, because it's not in your interest, it's not in everyone's interest. So basically it gives you that freedom to really choose in every situation what is appropriate for you to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and each trait too. Something else. I guess it's not so black or white. Like we are either mature, emotionally mature, or we are emotionally immature. It's, if you think about all of these different behaviors that she has listed out, and you kind of think about on a scale of -10 to +10, with 0 being in the middle, kind of where am I with each of these different traits? Maybe possibly if you want to even figure out another person, thinking about where is their behavior with these, on this scale. So
I like most that it kind of, not that I self-reflect before this book, but since reading it, it kind of forced me to go another level of deepness into self-reflection on, well, as I was listening, it was like, that sounds like me, but then the other parts didn't. So it was cool that it forced me anyway to self-reflect on a deeper level with emotional maturity.
Yeah, I agree.
To work on.
Yeah, it's always a process. It truly is a journey.
Yes, it is.
So, okay, are we?
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you guys for being in the chat. And next month, we are going to be discussing the book, The Anger Trap by Dr. Les Carter. So I hope you guys can join us. It'll be the last Thursday of every month at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And again, this book club is sponsored by Audible. If you're interested in getting a free audiobook when you sign up for the program, you can go to audibletrial.com/thrive after abuse to get a free audiobook if you sign up. So Thank you again, you guys. Lots
Thank
of love
you.
to you. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So have a wonderful night.
Yep.
Yes.
Have a great night.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.